This is the story of a man named Stanley. Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor on his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy. And then one day, something very peculiar happened. Something that would forever change Stanley. Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on the monitor for him to follow. No one had showed up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi. Never in all his years at the company had this happened, this complete isolation. Something was very clearly wrong. Shocked, frozen solid, Stanley found himself unable to move for the longest time. But as he came to his wits and regained his senses, he got up from his desk and stepped out of his office.
The Stanley Parable is a masterpiece, and in this video I will explain why. It is a game that has so much personality and so much interaction, even with the minimal amount of mechanics it has. And in this video I'll go in depth about what makes Stanley Parable the masterpiece that it is, and I'll talk about the connection that us as players have with the game. So without further ado, let's talk about the Stanley Parable and why it is a masterpiece. The only mechanics that are in the Stanley Parable are walking and clicking your mouse on objects such as buttons. And now I know what you're thinking, doesn't that just make it a walking simulator? And yes, it does, and that's not a bad thing. In fact, it's the best way for the Stanley Parable to be. If it were any different, this game wouldn't be the masterpiece that it is, and it probably wouldn't have been as popular either. And when it comes to games that have minimal mechanics, that just include walking and a bit of interactivity with objects, they usually get criticized for it. But the Stanley Parable is different. It has never been criticized for minimal mechanics, unlike other walking simulators like Dear Esther and Proteus. And that's because it's got a lot more than just walking and mouse clicking on objects such as buttons. It has choice. What other walking simulators do wrong is that they're too linear. And that's not a bad thing, because maybe they just want to tell a certain kind of story, just one story, and they don't want to make it like a choose your own path. They just want to tell one linear story, kind of like movies and books, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then you have the Stanley Parable, which has many choices that you can make that will have an impact on how the game progresses and ends. Your choices in the Stanley Parable can impact how the narrator talks to you. Your choices can impact how the narrator's behavior towards you is. And not to also mention the many endings in the game in which you can achieve by making the choices you make. The choices you make have a large impact, and not only that, but it will keep you playing for many hours as well. The end is never is a phrase that the Stanley Parable goes by, and it is all true. The end is truly never, and the Stanley Parable, and no matter what, even if you've discovered all the secrets, choices, and endings in the game, it still leaves you thinking that there is more to be found. Even if there is nothing left to be found, such as secrets, choices, etc., you still keep on playing because you feel like there could be something else. You feel like there are more secrets to be found, because every playthrough in the Stanley Parable is different, and sometimes the narrator may say something that you've never heard him say before. And that just makes you think if there is something you haven't discovered yet, and makes you want to play more. The end is never in the Stanley Parable, and that's just the way it's meant to be. It is made to never truly end. We as players have a strong connection with the Stanley Parable, but what gives us that connection? Well, it's the narrator, of course. You see, the narrator plays one of the biggest and most important roles in the game. Every choice you as a player makes, he will react to, and the choices you make in the Stanley Parable will impact the way the narrator acts towards you as well. And sometimes, depending on the choices you make, it will actually feel like the narrator is actually there with you, watching you, the player, play the game. It makes you feel like the narrator is there beside you, watching you play, and it actually feels like he is there at that very moment, watching you play the game and judging your every movement.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left. This was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well. Perhaps he wanted to stop by the employee lounge first, just to admire it. Ah, yes, truly a room worth admiring. It had really been worth the detour after all, just to spend a few moments here in this immaculate, beautifully, but eager to get back to business, Stanley took the first open door on his left. Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't fired years ago. Look, Stanley, I think perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot here. I'm not your enemy, really, I'm not. I realize that investing your trust in someone else can be difficult, but the fact is that the story has been about nothing but you all this time. There's some... What? Really? I was in the middle of something. Do you have zero consideration for others? Are you that convinced that I want something bad to happen to you? Why, I don't know how to convince you of this, but I really do want to help you, to show you something beautiful. Look, let me prove it. Let me prove that I'm on your side. Give me a chance. Now listen carefully, this is important. Stanley walked through the red door. Oh, thank God you are willing to listen to me. Do you see that I really have wanted you to be happy all this time? The problem is all these choices. The two of us always trying to get somewhere that isn't here. Running and running and running, just the way you're doing right now. Don't you see that it's killing us, Stanley? I wanted to stop. We would both be so much happier if we just stopped. And I think I have a solution. Here, let me show you. What do we want? What are we looking for? Here. Yes. Oh, it's beautiful, isn't it? If we just stay right here, right in this moment with this place, Stanley, I think I feel happy. I actually feel happy. No, wait. Where are you going? Oh no. Stay away from those stairs. If you hurt yourself, if you die, the game will reset. We'll lose all of this. Please, no, Stanley, let me stay here. Don't take this from me. No!
So as you all just saw from that example, you can clearly see how you would feel a connection with the narrator, how the choices you make have an impact, how we as a player feel like the narrator is there beside us and actually watching us play, as if he were a real person. The Stanley Parable is the definition of a surreal game. The whole tone of the game, the way everything is laid out, the soundtrack, the eeriness, are just some of the things that have to do with this game being considered surreal. And in all honesty, I can't really go in depth about what makes the Stanley Parable surreal, since it's all right there. As soon as the game starts, a strange, eerie feeling hits you. as you wander out of your office and wander around alone as some mysterious music plays and the narrator speaks. And speaking of being alone, that is something else that makes this game surreal as well. The fact that you are alone in an office building while seeing absolutely nobody whatsoever is something that really adds to this game being surreal. So when it comes to the Stanley Parable being a masterpiece, I guess you could say that it's surrealist art. In conclusion, the Stanley Parable is truly a masterpiece for all the reasons I said in this video. If you did enjoy and agree to most of the things I said, then be sure to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications as well, as it is very important that you do so then you can get notified whenever I upload a brand new video. Also, I do have a Google form in which you can submit topics that I can talk about in some of my videos, and also be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and also join my Discord, and I will see you all soon in my next video. Bye bye.